Welcome to the Random Encounter Show. I'm DeathStalker V, coming in for our weekly installment of Table Talk. Even though we don't have a table, even though it's not Tuesday, what happened there? Better late than never, right? Coming in from the studio, guys. I'm going to tell you, I'm having a little bit of a rough time. Here for the last several days, I'm just out of gas. You ever felt like this? I don't know, maybe it's all the food comas and stuff catching up from my birthday. I have no idea. But it feels, I don't know, it's just like a few hours after waking up from bed, I'm ready to go back to sleep. I don't know. I think it's the fall coming in. I know it got here today. First off, we're having our first real rain since July. Been in extreme drought conditions. But right before the rain got here, I tell you, nature is amazing. Right before the rain got here, all the birds from up north are coming down to where we live to roost for the winter. It literally like millions of them. I'll put a video up. But it was just millions of birds. This went on for like an hour. Yeah, you couldn't even hear yourself think around here because the birds were squawking. It's like, let me go to sleep. I don't know, guys. But yeah, I'm doing the best I can to keep things rolling around here. Life's a little bit crazy. Isn't this a gaming show? Sometimes you gotta remind me, right? What are we gonna talk about this week? First off, have you something to drink. Come sit down in the studio with DeathStalker V. Because we're gonna, guess what? We're gonna get right back into some hobby gaming discussion here. Over the last few days, I've had a buddy of mine. He's an online friend of mine. Most of my friends are online. I'm an introvert. I stay in the house most of the time nowadays. I don't know what happened to me. But he's an online friend of mine. But I've known him. He actually started off as a student of mine. But I've known him now for over a decade. Wait, I feel old, DeathStalker. Sometimes I forget. I'm not, 17 myself. But it's known him, and he had a bunch of questions about getting into hobby gaming. And I said, this is a perfect episode, basically. And I'm going to be upfront with you. We're going to be talking about starting hobby gaming, not just on how to start it. This is going to be geared more toward advice on what to avoid and how to really get yourself into it properly. I don't know how to explain it. Come on, guys. I'm about to fall asleep over here. If you got something better to do, help your children with their homework, drive your mother-in-law to town or something, I don't know. You may want to do it, but we're in. But I have a lot of trouble with these beginner videos. It's why I try to avoid them, even though they're one of the most popular formats you can do on YouTube. And the simple reason is this, is that I have no idea what it's like to be a beginner now in 2023. When I began in the early 90s into actual hobby gaming, it was so drastically different then than it is now. Even though the problems are the same. It's just a reversal of the problem. That's information. When I started, it was almost the most difficult thing to deal with was the lack of information. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have a ton of resources like Google and such to really study and learn about hobby gaming and see what others were doing. We had some magazines. we had a few books, and we had those people in person that we could find who seemed like they knew what they were talking about. Nowadays I think it's information overload. You can look up a subject like starting whatever hobby game or just starting hobby gaming in general, and you're going to get a massive amount of information, and a lot of it conflicts each one another. That this person says do this, well these other three people say do that, and this one says do this and do that. So I can see where that can be just as confusing as well. So it's funny that we sort of had the same problem, but the reverse sides of what causes the problem. And yeah, I don't know what it would be like to be a beginner now. Some of you in the audience may be able to tell me. I don't know. But when it comes to beginner style stuff, it's not something I really look at. It's not something I really pay attention to. It doesn't interest me. I don't want to invest money in it. I'm already hooked into many other the hobby games that I've been into for so long that I don't have extra money to get into new and shiny games. Come on. Come on. But with hobby gaming, there are a few basics that will always remain the same as long as hobby gaming is in the mediums that we play them. So I can help with that, and I can help with advice on, like I said, on things to avoid. So my buddy, he's getting into 40K, or thought he was getting into 40K. I talked him out of 40K. My bad, right? But he thought he was getting into 40K. And one of the first things he did that I said, this is the thing to talk about to avoid. This is a good one to avoid. Is that I'm definitely guilty of it. I think almost all hobby gamers will be guilty of this little bit. But he came to me, this is what we want to do. And he had the biggest Warhammer 40K box set that I think they sell. It was like $200. It was stuffed full. And I said, that's a big, beautiful box of stuff. I said, but that's not what you want. That's not where you want to get your feet wet in 40K. He says, yes, it is. That's what I want. Now, I previously told him about the skirmish game, but no, he wants the big giant game, the full 40K. I said, it's not what you want, buddy. And within a few questions I had, he found out it's not what he wanted either. Because if you look at that box set, you see all those big, beautiful painted miniatures all ready to play on a beautiful table and stuff. That's what you picture your game's going to be like. Yeah? But that's not necessarily true. You're looking at the end result and not looking at all the stuff in between. The first thing I asked him was, do you have a table that's at least 6 foot long, maybe 4 foot wide? Or maybe an 8-foot table, 8x4 table? No, I've got a small kitchen table. I said, well, where do you think you're going to play this game? Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And yeah, you can get away with making some play surfaces out of plywood, maybe a folding picnic table, whatever you can do. But it's these small things like, where am I going to play this game? These kind of things I think are often overlooked by those who are just starting off, and even those who are veterans like myself. I overlook things quite often. But we went further discussing that. He said, well, what about the skirmish game? Is it like the big game? I said, I can't really tell you that. I said, I think it focuses more on like man-to-man combat. I think it's 10 miniatures per side. What's it called? Kill team, I think. I said, it sort of focuses on that, but it's typically played on like a 3 foot by 3 foot surface. And I said, it has some box sets and stuff to get you started, etc. Of course, Games Workshop marketing. They got everything you need but what you need, right? It's I know. People absolutely hate Games Workshop. I'm not one of the people that hates Games Workshop for what they do. Yeah? When it comes to their marketing, when it comes to their games and their quality and stuff, I think they knock it out of the park for that. I'm not a fan of Games Workshop. Well, I'm not a fan of modern Games Workshop. Simply because of what they did with Age of Sigmar. We don't even need to get into this or whatever. But I love the old Warhammer Fantasy and all this kind of stuff. And I tried to keep up with Games Workshop here and there. But when they just absolutely killed off an entire world and replaced it with this new Age of Sigmar, I wasn't the only person who just said, I've had enough. You know, I know quite a few people that was the line. That was it. You know. But with Games Workshop, yes, they are quality. And you may not like their marketing strategies. I certainly don't. And I don't think they reflect healthy hobby gaming. But, you know, they've got it going on. They're the game outside of role-playing games, you know, like Dungeons and Dragons is the name there. But Games Workshop, Warhammer, they're sort of synonymous with hobby gamers, especially for people coming from the outside. But yeah, he looked at the skirmish game. Okay, what do I need here? What do I need here? And I said, well, wait a second. I said, I've known you for a long time, but I've never known you to be in science fiction stuff. I've always known you to be like a fantasy gamer when it comes to video games and this kind of stuff. I got him into Talisman, Fabled Lands, and different things, but, you know, generally he enjoys it. We have a good time playing Talisman and stuff when we do, but he enjoys fantasy. And he said, well, is there fantasy versions? I said, guys, there's like 100,000 war games out there, skirmish games and stuff. There's any kind of genre that you want. But he's like, well, with Games Workshop, I said, there's Age of Sigmar. If you just have to have Games Workshop stuff. But I quickly got him off that as well. So he got to looking at that. And they have their, war bands. I think that's war bands, I don't know. It's the skirmish version of the Age of Sigmar rules. He was looking at that. Wow, this set's cool. This set's cool. This set's cool. And it brings up something else to think about here. Box sets are a great way to get your feet wet in the hobby, but they're also a great way that if you progress in the hobby, that you get your feet wet and you really want to continue it, they're a great way of having a whole bunch of stuff that you'll no longer find useful. Yeah? I could do a whole video on this subject. When I got into gaming, and for a long time, box sets weren't necessarily starter sets like they are today. Box sets were sort of like the deluxe version of a role-playing game or a war game or whatever you were going to get had to offer. You know, look at D&D, the early box sets. You could buy the book separately, but if you got the box set, you got the dice, you got adventures, you got the rules, full rules. You know, it was the same for like Rollmaster. RuneQuest 3rd edition had the deluxe box set. You know, nowadays the box sets are almost like appetizers. You don't get a full rule book. You're going to get some rules, what you need to play, what's in the box set. And you're going to get this and that and everything. And like I said, it's a great way to get your feet wet. But with hobby gaming, it's a great way to end up with a bunch of stuff you no longer need. Case in point, an example, we can talk about D&D. You buy the D&D starter set or whatever it is. Okay, you can buy it, you really like it. What's your very next purchase? Probably the core rule books, right? So all those appetizer rules, we'll call them, starter rules or whatever, they just got made useless. Maybe it came with some dice. Okay, dice are never going to become useless, but more than likely you're going to find a set of dice that you specifically choose that you're going to use and not the dice that came with the set. And the same goes for almost everything else in these sets. But with hobby gaming, war gaming and stuff, it's better to be particular and specific about what you buy. Yeah? So my advice, looking at this, is always skip the beginner boxes, skip all the box sets, and buy the core rule book. Because if you like this game, you're going to be buying the core rule book anyways. Yeah? Buy the core rule book and get a feel for the game. Especially with wargaming and stuff. With Games Workshop, come on guys, you buy the core book. Next, you got to buy the specific army book you want to use. Games Workshop has this unending thing of, we're not going to give you everything. We're only going to give you small bits at a time. It's I don't know. I can't stand it, really. Can't stand it. Anyways, if you buy the core book, now you can sort of understand the game and choose an army or faction or whatever it is you want to play. And then you can build that and go for the specific miniatures. Yeah, now if you buy the box set, you get the starter rules or the rules enough to play this box set, and you get a bunch of miniatures. Who knows if you're going to actually want to use them or not in the future. Maybe I've explained that. I don't know. You know. But yeah, box sets are normally, they can be a great way to get your feet wet, but they ultimately end up normally being just a bunch of useless stuff you have afterwards. So I was guiding him along on that. And I said, why does it have to be a Games Workshop game? And he says, what do you mean? I said, there's literally only one good reason that I know that you would have to play a Games Workshop game. And that's the fact that if you want to play in tournaments, you know, at local game stores, conventions, whatever, that would be the really only legitimate reasons that you have to have a Games Workshop game. Because you can't show up to an official Games Workshop tournament of any kind not using Games Workshop products. And I said, is that something you plan on doing? And he says, well, maybe, I don't know. I said, if that's what you're planning on doing, that you want to participate in the local gaming scene, tournament scene, instead of looking at all this stuff you can buy, you need to go down to the actual store, the convention, or whatever, the club, whatever, where they're playing these games, and get familiar with what they're playing and how they're playing it. Yeah, because maybe you buy a whole bunch of Games Workshop stuff. You go down to your local store or whatever, and you find out they don't even touch 40K skirmish stuff. They only play the full version of 40K. Or something like that, you know. So you want to make sure that your money can get as much value as you can out of dealing with things. So yeah, definitely if you plan on playing a tournament scene, all that, you better go check out the tournament scene first. But otherwise, why do you need a Games Workshop game? I said, like I said, there's hundreds of thousands of war games out there. I said the better choice would be one that you could use any miniatures for at any scale and be able to play it. That way you don't have to buy specific miniatures. Yeah? That's one thing I pretty much stick to now in my hobbies. I don't want to, you know, you could use any miniatures for anything, right? But with stuff like Games Workshop miniatures for like 40K and Age of Sigmar and stuff, they have such a distinctive look that it, you know, imagine trying to take 40K miniatures and you're going to play a game of Traveller RPG with it. You know, it just wouldn't feel right. Not to me anyways. I know it's probably being snobby or picky, but it just wouldn't feel right to me. But having games where you can choose any miniatures that you want, you know, you could definitely find a sci-fi skirmish game, buy whatever miniatures you want for it, and then turn around and use them for a role-playing game, for example. Same with if you're going to run a fantasy game, do all that. So that takes your hobby further with the amount of money that you have to spend. You know, having miniatures that, and look at it as a time investment. You know, do I really want to paint up a bunch of miniatures that I'm only going to use for one game? Not me. Not me. It's just not me. But so, yeah, there's a lot of ways to think about that. But having what I consider pure hobby games, where it's basically a rule book or whatever, and you provide the rest of the game yourself, I think they allow a much more versatile hobby, if you will. I don't know. Where was I? I don't know, guys. I'm trying to stay awake. I literally am. I apologize. I'm terrible. With the hobby, though, we talked about the versatility, getting generic miniatures. Hey, that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I like running a great multitude of games. The next thing I had to ask him was this. Do you always plan on playing with your friend? that's getting into this with you are playing at tournaments. And that's an important thing to think about. Yeah? I wish I knew the percentage. I don't even know an estimate. But if you're banking on gaming with certain friends or this certain person, you better make sure they're into it before you go all the way in. Yeah? I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it. I've seen so many people. I've seen so many people get interested in a game and they want to play it. They want to play it. I've been in these shoes. I get all excited about the game. I get into it. I grab the stuff and I want to play the game, but they might have bought the box set. They might have bought the core rules, but that's the last you ever hear of it. Yeah? And I see it all the time because I buy used miniatures a lot. I buy to use for the show and also to pre-paint and sell my commission work. I buy a lot of used miniature lots so I can strip them down and paint them up and sell them. But I see a ton of it. It's you get a box set that had 1 or 2 miniatures painted in it. The rest are still on sprue, and it doesn't look like it's ever been touched. What do you want to say? At least 6 out of 10 people get an interest in the hobby and they make a purchase, but it never goes further than that. I would say that's probably a really, really safe one. 6 out of 10. But if you're banking, if you're banking on your friend that you're going to play this game and that's something you're going to do, before you go all out, you better make sure that you're interested in this game beyond just playing it with your friend. Yeah? That brings up, hey, I buy the game, my friend doesn't get interested in it. Can I find other people to play with, or am I willing to play it solo? So we went through these series of questions, and eventually I turned him on to Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes, Fantasy Miniature Skirmish Rules, from the same people that brought you 4 Against Darkness and such. I like this little rule set, to be honest, for fantasy skirmish gaming. It's one that I used. I said, I think this fits your bill way better than your Game Workshop Age of Sigmar war bands and all this kind of stuff. First off, you get a core book. Yeah, no box set. But your core book also contains things like your army list and such. I said, you buy this, you read the rules, get an understanding of the rules, pick you out an army. Now, from there, we can start finding you miniatures to build your army list. Yeah? And that's exactly what he's done. He appears to be really happy with this. And I said, this is easily played on a 3x3 surface. You can use miniatures from anywhere. We'll talk about miniatures in a second. But I said, you can set your table up. I said, don't go hog wild for your table just yet. He wanted to know about battle mats. So I said, look, if you're going to buy any battle mats, get a 3x3 double-sided. One with like a desert wasteland kind of side and one with a grassy side. That's going to cover the most ground, no pun intended, for your gaming needs. I said, but really and truly, I would hold off on buying any of that. Those are expensive now. My favorite company that does that's Warzone Studios, and they're not messing around with the prices anymore. But they definitely have high quality stuff. But I said, before you get all into that, one of the easiest things you can do is get like a green beach towel or a brown beach towel, fold it up to a 3x3 square, and just lay it on the table. I said, if you want terrain and features and all that, it's pretty easy that you can take stuff and just put it under the towel, such as, you can go to almost any department store that has an art section. You can get various foam half spheres and such and stuff like this, and you can actually just throw it up under the towel, and it does a decent job at being some beginner terrain. Don't go all out. Get a feel for things. Don't look at the end result and think that's where you have to be before you start gaming. When it came to miniatures, he had 1,000 questions, and we'll get into painting miniatures and stuff on another episode, because our mini episodes. But he had 1,000 questions. What paints to use? This, that, Games Workshop, contrast paints, Vallejo speed paints, or what is it? Army Painter speed paints. Vallejo stuff, And I said, slow down. I said, again, end results. I said, first off, with miniatures, if you're going to start off, you need an X-Acto knife, a pair of hobby clippers, some tweezers, some super glue, maybe some small needle files. Why do I need that? I said, that's because you've actually got to work the miniatures a little bit, clean them up and have them ready before you ever start priming and putting paint on them. You know, you got to have a way to take mold lines off and to assemble. Super glue is something essential to have. I like the gel type. It's a little easier and less messy to work with. I'm just throwing some advice out there, guys. But you got to have the sort of essential tool set to put your miniatures together and get them cleaned up and get ready for painting. And I said, don't fall down this crazy rabbit hole that you've got to buy branded stuff. There's no reason whatsoever you need to pay 20, 15 bucks, 30 bucks or more for some Games Workshop or Army Painter clippers or whatever. Guys, these little green handle clippers, yeah, I've got 2 pairs of them. I had this one since like 2012. It met its demise a few weeks ago. I was trimming into some stuff I was going to use for terrain, and I didn't know that it had a little metal steel rod in it, and it ate these clippers up a little bit. So I bought a brand new pair. These are like $4 from Walmart. You can find them anywhere, but they work. They cut flesh. They cut flesh. I guess. I guess. They cut flesh. Oh, there goes our monetization, huh? No, they cut flush, and they do a fantastic job. But again, $4. There's no reason you have to have some hobby-specific clippers. They all do the same function. Okay, some might do something differently or better than others. But just starting off, and even somebody like me, I've been using these for a very long time. I've never found a reason to upgrade them. Yeah? When it comes to time to paint and such, for the most part, if I don't fall out of my chair, this episode, I'm waking up now, guys. No, for the most part, you know, I do commission painting and stuff. I know there's going to be a lot of people tell you can't use apple barrel paints and stuff that are like 51 cents for 2 ounces. You absolutely can. This is my main arsenal of paints. And yeah, I use a lot of different stuff as well. Things I use to save time and whatnot. But I can absolutely paint just anything from start to finish using this cheap paint and some basic techniques like dry brushing and stuff. Using things like inks and contrast paints and such. They help speed things up, but I don't use them because they give me a better paint job. No, in fact, I think just doing a really good paint job with these looks better than painting with contrast paint and such. You know, but that's subjective. But I find my best paint jobs I've done is when I just use basic acrylic paints and use good techniques to finish out the miniature. I will say that I splurge a little bit. You know, when it comes to primer, I'm a brush-on primer guy. I live in a very humid place. Forget anything you got to spray. So I've been using Vallejo primers for a long time. Gray's probably a really good starting color to get. This one's not mixed up and sitting on the shelf. I've got a lot to say about Vallejo primers in a future video. I've actually quit using them. I moved over to AK Interactive. They're way on the other side though. So we came close to going to the emergency room just trying to grab something right beside us. I don't want to reach all the way across. But anyways, I've moved over to AK Interactive with their paints. Vallejo also makes brush-on varnishes, matte and gloss. Somewhat happy with those, but AK Interactive makes an ultra matte that I'm much more happy with. Are we getting too far into it? Painting though, you shouldn't go out and spend a fortune, okay? The only reason I get the Vallejo and stuff like primers and stuff is because Walmart doesn't sell a brush-on primer that I can use. I've been thinking about using the Gesso stuff. I don't know how that'll go, but it's definitely probably the only thing I really splurge on because you need to prime and varnish your miniatures. But like I said, getting your feet wet, using some cheap paints, if you want to call them cheap paints. Your first brush set. Do we have one laying around here? I think I do. I don't know. Let me look, guys. I've got a partial one here. The first brush set. These come from Walmart. Again, a cheap Chinese made brush set. These are perfectly serviceable for miniature painting. Yeah, now I found that I like the army painter brushes a little bit better. I like the triangle grip on them and stuff. But I painted with these for years. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. If you learn some proper brush care and maintenance type things, maybe use a little bit of that brush cleaner stuff. I don't know. It's over there too. We'll do a video on starting painting. Why not? Why not? But you don't need to buy the best of the best with the gaming stuff, because it's not really going to matter when you're a beginner. You know, you're not going to get the most out of specialty paints as a beginner. And the specialty paints will not make your miniatures look any better. I promise you, they're not going to do it. Sitting down with the acrylic paints, learning to put your base coats on, learning a little bit of dry brushing, learning a little bit about shading and such, that's what's going to make your miniatures look good. Yeah? So, yeah. But with miniatures, I told him, I said, he's lucky he knows me, right? Because I've got boxes of miniatures. So we're going to get him squared away. But he came to me wanting to know about miniatures. And I said, for a beginner, I said, I really suggest Reaper Bones miniatures. For a beginner, I said, they have fantastic miniatures for the most part. With the plastics, they're pretty much all assembled. Especially the humanoid ones, the human-sized and smaller. They're all assembled. If there is assembly required or something, it's fairly easy. Can be done with some super glue. You're not worried about pinning and all this kind of stuff. I said, but those miniatures are pretty easy to paint. And they're pretty easy to use. They're a little bit more expensive than, say, like this box we have here we haven't started on, like Dungeons and Lasers. What is this box? $47 retail. It comes with 62 miniatures. But I think, you know, on the sprue with all the tiny bits and assembly, that's going to be a little harder for beginners to take a grasp on. But you can definitely save a lot of money. It just requires a lot more work. Yeah? But for a small skirmish game and such, and putting your army together, there's no reason why you shouldn't use some Reaper Bone miniatures. I know a lot of people suggest starting painting on army guys, you know, the green army guys and stuff. I do not. I do not. You need to start learning on very nice miniatures with good detail. The army stuff don't have detail. You want to work on your fine detail and getting your techniques down. So what if you paid whatever for the miniature? There's absolutely nothing that makes painting permanent. Yeah? Strip your miniatures, paint them again if you hate them. Whatever you've got to do, but learning to get a painting standard down using miniatures and learning those techniques to make them look fantastic, that's where the key is for this. Like I said, I suggested for him Reapers. They have very nice miniatures, but they're very generic, so they can be used for all types of gaming. I think he's going to be happy with it, especially if he graduates into RPGs and such. But yeah, the next thing that I think is the most important thing as far as money-wise and value-wise to remember with starting hobby gaming is that hobby gaming is not like board gaming. With board gaming, you're sort of limited to your box. You know, you're stuck in the box is what I like to say. I'm not a huge fan of board gaming, by the way. But you're sort of stuck in the box. Coming over to hobby gaming, you've got to realize right off the bat that hobby gaming, there is no limit. You know, with any game or whatever you choose, it gives you a foundation, but there is no limit to what you can do and how much of it you can do. You can come up with like a role-playing game. What's the limit on the adventures you can have using some core rules, for example? If you're creative. Same with a war game. You can come up with all kind of scenarios. You can come up with all kind of campaigns. You can introduce new armies and such. And for most all this stuff, there's always something further to buy. It's known as a supplement. Yeah, good game companies understand that, and they try to keep it. And it's useful material for the most part. You know, supplements are some of the best stuff you can get. But there's no limit to it. But you got to realize that also means there's no limit on what you can spend in this hobby, no matter what game or games you play. So having things like modular terrain that you can use for just about anything, having miniatures that are a little bit more generic that you can use for pretty much anything. These are all huge pluses, at least for me. It took me years before I really started figuring this stuff out and putting it to practice on my table. You know? Anyways, guys. Starting hobby gaming, like I said, it can be confusing. It doesn't have to be. Like I said, if you'll stick with some of my advice, that if you see a game you really like, get out and research it. You know, look at YouTube videos, read articles. Better yet, see if you can find somebody that knows something about it locally. Maybe you can see some games being played or get involved somehow. Sometimes that's the best route. You know, if you know me, for example, and you're getting into a game that I've been into for a while, I probably have a shoebox of stuff I'll give you. You know what I mean? It's just the nature of the hobby. Just to help you out and get you rolling. So you never know. You got to get out there and meet people and be friendly, especially if it's a game that you want to play with others. Where was I going with this? Oh, just becoming familiar with the game and grabbing that core rule book. I think that's the best possible first purchase you can make, because no matter what you say, if you end up liking that game, you're going to be buying that regardless. Yeah? Like I said, looking at hobby games in total, going through the questions in your mind of what you'll want from your game. Make sure that you choose a game that appears to answer all those questions. Get the game, test it out, see how it goes. Don't do heavy investment until you're sure. Yeah? I think that's very important. We're so caught up in the consumerism of the game stuff nowadays that it's nothing to see a game and it's like, holy smokes, I can pay $600 for the all-in bundle and it looks so great. I can only imagine that it's so great. Yeah, that can often be pretty disappointing. I hate to say it. It can be disappointing. It behooves you much better. Behooves you to, you know, in better hobby gaming, is to get a feel for the game, see what the game's about, and make your specific purchases. Don't just blanket purchases thinking that more is better. Trust me, I'm an old gamer. I know a lot of even older gamers than myself. You start off wanting everything big, you end up wanting everything small. You don't want to deal with big stuff and everything specific. You know, it's I don't know, guys. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to call it off before we keep tripping over words and have no idea where we even are. I'm DeathStalker V. This has been Table Talk. And next week, you'll probably get another late episode. I have to go out of town for a memorial service with the deaths in my family. But I'll do my best to get on with another video. And I hope all of you are being safe out there. And I hope you're enjoying the fall wherever you're at. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere, I guess you're getting ready for spring. So, good time for everybody, right? Anyways, this has been Table Talk. I'll see you guys again soon.
Hey, this is DeathStalker V. I wanted to thank you for watching the Random Encounters show. If you love tabletop gaming, solo RPGing, or classic video games, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. If you want more of the show, head over to our channel's About page. There you will find our Facebook and Facebook group pages where you can join in on the fun. Want to help support the show? Make sure to use our affiliate and sponsor links next time you're shopping for your favorite gaming products. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time when we roll for Random Encounter.